I agree. Yep. There's so much. That's very much that. Not you, but. Preparation, but sort of the words. A lot of it. I see one to help with. What?
Yes. Happy Wednesday, Council. For those of you who are here nice and early, we will start in about 13 minutes. And if you want to go get a headshot for free, then you can go right over there. Just tap Aaron and get a nice headshot for our website and all those kind of good things. But yeah, 13 minutes will begin, and grab a headshot while you're here.
Test.
We can hear you. Thank you. No.
All right, 1 minute warning. Oh, hello. But yeah, get your coffee and we'll fix this echo. Yeah, testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Go low. Yeah, I can serenade you. All right, testing, testing. It's better. All right, it's 1 o'clock. You ready? All right. All right, it is 1 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. I warned you in September I would bring the gavel, and we still need to work on that echo. Yes, but all right, trying our best. Welcome to Cheyenne. Thank you for those who traveled in Wyoming. Oh dear, that's very distracting. Hold on, give us just a few more minutes.
Dan.
the Director of Development and Enterprise Applications for Blue Federal Credit Union.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Kircher. I'm here from Cheyenne. I'm the operations manager at the NCAR Wyoming Supercomputing Center. I represent the tech industry and also federally funded research and development centers.
Travis Lawrence from Buffalo, Wyoming, president of First Northern Bank of Wyoming, representing, I guess, the financial services industry and private industry.
Tony Cross. I'm the Human Resources Director at the Jackson Hole Airport. So transportation-ish.
Hi, I'm Wendy Fiska-John. I'm from Gillette, Wyoming. I'm the owner of DF Safety Consulting.
I'm Larry Fodor from Cheyenne, Vice President of Mechanical Systems. We do commercial plumbing and heating here in Cheyenne, so representing construction industry.
Good afternoon, Ron Goldberg. I'm the Strategic Partnerships Director for the Wyoming Business Council, the state's economic development agency. Work a lot with fellow agencies, workforce and economic development, of course, go hand in hand, and then partners and like Small Business Development Center, Manufacturing Works, and then private industry too. So happy to see you all again. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all. Nikki Harper with Workforce Services. I am the Administrator for Vocational Rehabilitation, which is Title IV of the WIO Act. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Debbie Zolnowski from Gillette, Wyoming, and I'm with the Holiday Inn Express representing hospitality industry.
Good afternoon. I'm Corinne Schmidt. I'm the Director of the Wyoming Department of Family Services, representing apparently state government and children and families.
Hey all, my name is Bria Hammock. I guess newly since our last meeting, I'm now the VP of Marketing at Madden Media, which is a tourism-related marketing agency, but I also own a art gallery and boutique in downtown Cheyenne. So I guess representing private industry all the way around.
Good afternoon. I'm Tina Conley. I'm the Executive Director of iReach2 and Casper. We are a service provider for folks with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So I think that is what I'm representing, and maybe the nonprofit sector. I don't know.
Good afternoon. I'm Laurel Ballard. I am the Chief Academic and Student Services Officer with the Wyoming Community College Commission, and I am representing adult education, which is Title II of WIOA.
Ron Wild. I'm here at the privilege of being with Rocky Mountain Power, although, you know, not everyone in the state necessarily would think that's a good thing, but I do, because it affords me the opportunity to go out and do great things. So, and I represent private industry.
I'm Dr. Michelle Aldrich, and I serve at the Wyoming Department of Education as the Career and Technical Education Supervisor, overseeing career and technical education for Wyoming K through 14. And I am Superintendent Dagenfelder's designee to this board.
Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Morgan. I am the Training Director for the Wyoming Statewide Electrical Apprenticeship Program based in Casper. So I'm here to represent apprenticeships, earn while you learn, and labor. Thank you.
My name is Phil Cornella. I work for the International Union of Operating Engineers, and we represent union labor.
I'm Dan Meyer, Training Director for the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters and HVAC Service Technicians Apprenticeship Program here in Cheyenne, representing labor.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lauren Schoenfeld. I'm a Senior Policy Advisor for Governor Gordon, and I am his designee on this board.
Hello, I am Liz Gagan, and I am the Director of the Department of Workforce Services.
Great, thank you all. And then do we have some folks who are joining us online that would like to introduce themselves?
Hi, this is Danny Bureau. I'm in Saratoga, Wyoming, owner of the Malt Burger Bar.
You have 10 seconds of opportunity.
Oh, am I working?
All right, so we do have some council members who are online, and we will continue to work through that. So that being said, we also have some folks from the Department of Workforce Services and a bunch of other folks back there. So feel free to meet them when we have opportunities to do so. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Jennifer to go ahead and do our formal roll call, please.
Also, Matthew Davis has done a chat saying Matthew Davis, Wind River Reservation or Wind River Job Corps. But now I'll start the. Danny Bureau says Danny Bureau, the Malt Burger Bar, and he is private industry. And to go back to Matthew Davis, he represents workforce.
I'm testing my audio here again for Trevor. Can you hear me on that end? This is Danny.
We can, Danny. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Governor Mark Gordon or designee.
Present.
Senator Fred Baldwin. Representative Ryan Berger. Ron Wild.
Present.
Tony Cross.
Present.
Dick Smith. Chair Eric Trowbridge.
Present.
Larry Fodor.
Present.
Michael Kircher.
Present.
Bria Hammock.
Present.
Deborah Zonowski.
Present.
Wendy Fiskett-John.
Present.
Tina Conley.
Present.
Nathan Williams. Philip Cornella.
Here.
Brenda Morgan.
Present.
Danny Bureau.
Present.
Charles Wilson.
Present.
Dan Meyer.
Present.
Matthew Davis. I'm going to take his I am earlier as present. Director Elizabeth Gagan.
Present.
Nikki Harper.
Present.
Mayor Matt Hall. Katie Hogarty.
Present.
Travis Lawrence.
Here.
Ben Moritz or designee.
Here.
Superintendent Degenfelder or designee.
Present.
Corinne Schmidt or designee.
Present.
Josh Durrell or designee.
Ron Goldberg, present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Great. Thank you very much. And I do believe we had one additional council member that joined us after introductions, but Katie, would you just like to do a quick introduction, please?
Yes, Katie Hogarty, the CEO of Climb Wyoming. I represent workforce in poverty and nonprofits.
Awesome. Great. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to agenda B. And that's going to be the approval of the agenda. So for those of you who are familiar, obviously we use Onboard as our primary tool for sharing your resources. And so if you take a look at that, we have our agenda as presented there. So I would welcome a motion to approve the agenda as written.
So moved.
All right, so moved by Mr. Wild. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Brenda. Any council discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agenda has been approved as presented. And agenda item number C, we also need to have an approval of our September minutes, once again, also made available to you via Onboard. So I would welcome a motion to approve the September minutes.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion.
All right, so moved by Brenda Morgan. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Tony Cross. Any council discussion around the September minutes? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we have now approved our September minutes. Moving on to agenda item number 2 is going to be the message from the chairman, which would be me. So I'm going to move over here so everyone can see me, and then we'll move on from there. So let me just do a quick transition. All right. Well, hello, everyone. And again, welcome to Cheyenne and welcome to our Q4 2024 Wyoming Workforce Development Council meeting. Really excited to be here. Lots obviously in our world going on, and so it doesn't stop. We just, the show must go on, as they say. So I do have a few quick updates for you as far as chairman address goes. Even though the September meeting and the meeting that we have now is a very short time period, but a lot has really happened in that time period. So just the first thing, reminding the council's kind of as housekeeping goes. As you all know, we all do our best to try to attend in person when we can, because it's one of my favorite things, right? It's going and seeing site visits and tours, hanging out at dinner, chatting, networking, talking to people. So just when you get those RSVP forms that Jennifer sends out, just please, when you say that you're going to attend in person, unless it's a crazy storm, please do your best to commit to making that decision to come in person. It does cost us money and logistical stuff if at the very last minute you're unable to attend. I know all of you are super busy in our day-to-day lives, but just a kind of a housekeeping thing, that would be great for us. My first thing I want to kind of just make sure is in front of you, this was shared and on board, is we did decide on our locations for 2025 and the dates. So those have been shared with you. And this goes into kind of my next point of slowly changing or tweaking or hopefully improving the way that our council meetings run. And so one of the ideas that Jennifer and the team and I kind of were brainstorming is when looking at locations, instead of just maybe getting a map of Wyoming and doing a dart, like, oh, we haven't been to Gillette in a while. Oh, we need to go over here. I really want to ensure that there's a purpose for this council to visit and to make sure when we're in these communities that we're making the most of it. And so what we decided to do is our first change is that we will have each of you potentially, if you're willing to host the council in your home city. Your community best, your community leaders, your mayor, the economic development agency firms, who's working in travel and tourism, the people that we should probably talk to, that we want to talk to, right? To get informed decision-making and how we might be able as a council to help these communities. And so what we decided to do is we're going to keep with the theme from the prior chairman, which will be in our Q1 meeting. We will continue to be remote only. So it'll be one full day of Zoom. Again, it's just too unpredictable to move around the state, between January and March. But our Q2 and our Q3 meetings, we're going to be a little bit more strategic about where we go, why we're going there, and then Jennifer and Ivy will be working with you on some changes there. And so we did announce that back in May, we're going to be going to Riverton and we're going to be joining and taking a look at the Job Corps Center, which I think is fantastic. And Matt Davis is going to be our host for our Job Corps come May. And then someplace I've talking to Tony as well. I think Jackson is fascinating to me. As we all know, it is a very different workforce than most of the state is. And I think there's a lot of value in us going there and hearing more about what's going on and how they integrate. And so Tony will actually be hosting us in Jackson in September. And I do believe we're going to be going and having that meeting at the Jackson Hole Airport. And then we'll be back in Cheyenne a year from now, just because we'll be kind of in the Casper area. We'll be going up to Jackson. But the idea is that as a council member, you're going to host us, and you tell us who are the people that in your networks that we should meet. And so actually, that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. We're going to have and again, I encourage feedback. I'm all about fearless feedback, but having a local panel where we as a council can talk to the mayor, can talk to some of the influential folks in those communities and gain a lot of insight or potential new partnerships. And so tomorrow you'll see in our agenda, we have representation from Cheyenne Leads. That is our local economic development agency. We also have the CEO of Visit Cheyenne, that kind of obviously does a lot of work in the tourism space here in Cheyenne. And then representing the arts, we have our very own Bria, who will be on the panel. And so we're really excited about that to bring purpose to our locations and make you guys hosts and bring us cool people that we can meet and kind of brainstorm and connect and network with. So hopefully that's a change that you all will like, and you'll see it for the first time in this quarterly meeting. Some other small changes, as you noticed, just wanted some music at the beginning, sometimes, especially, do we have any first-time council members here? It's your very first council meeting? I don't think we do. No, but it can be a little intimidating, right? You don't really know these people and you're sitting in this big professional room and it's just quiet. So like, can we just have like some classical music? Obviously, we struggled getting it off, but we're going to continue to do that. The other thing that we learned actually from Colorado, you all receive that survey, that pre-work survey. So that is something that I highly encourage that you all do, because now you know who's coming. And this also is incredibly helpful. We got great feedback from the people that are going to be speaking to us today and tomorrow for them to know, oh, these are the things that this council wants to know. This helps me prepare the right materials and all those kind of things. And so, it is kind of, in a way, I also threaten you all in September with homework. And here we are. So it is, I hope that you look at it as homework, as an opportunity for us to provide feedback to our speakers so that we're squeezing every single ounce of effort and of our valuable time that we have together. And then, the last thing I just want to kind of say is Jennifer and Lauren, and good to see you, Jerry, back there, and Ivy. We had the opportunity to go to the fall symposium for the National Governors Association. So you may hear us refer to the NGA. The NGA is a nationwide organization designed for primarily directors, liaisons, chairs, and vice chairs of all the state boards around the country. And they help us make informed policy decisions and also inform the governors of their states what we could do to make an impact or how we could do better. So we were actually in Mystic, Connecticut for 3 or 4 days. And, I was there on behalf of the others representing Wyoming. And proud to say, I think Wyoming had one of the largest delegations this year as far as representation goes. And it is truly so incredibly valuable to hear what other states, because a lot of the times that we're talking here, it's the same thing on a national level. Connecticut's having healthcare and they're struggling with workforce and trying to do this. And so the states actually get to share best practices with each other and go, oh, this is what we did. And so we're going to continue our partnership with the NGA and continue to share those bullet points with you. And we also do a site tour there, and we had the awesome opportunity to visit one of their largest companies in Connecticut called Electric Boat. And that is where they build nuclear powered submarines for the U.S. Navy. And so some personal takeaways for that was they have a workforce of 25,000 people that work for Electric Boat. To see how large this shipyard is and the process of assembling a nuclear submarine for the Navy. I mean, the thing is like 10, 12 stories high. The amount of welding and trade jobs that are needed to build these, they take anywhere from 5 to 8 years to get completed. But it's just it's really cool to go and see these things, as well, again, as realize we're not alone, and so I really encourage you as council members, if there are things as we go to the NGA to bring forward as wins in Wyoming or things like, I'm happy to kind of be your liaison for that. And then I think just kind of wrap it up. I also did want to confirm this. I don't know why this question has bothered me so much, but I needed to get a direct final answer. We, as a council, are the largest governor-appointed council in the state of Wyoming. So when we're fully staffed and we have all of the seats filled and we're all here, we do represent the largest council in the state. So once again, I kind of touched on that at the very end of our Q3 meeting. It's really important that you're here and that you get engaged with this because we do make a lot of important decisions that do impact a lot of people. And we've got some big decisions coming up ahead of us, including in this agenda today. And then, we talked about headshots. So I encourage you to do the headshots. And then secondly, the last announcement, and then I'll kind of yield some of my time, is, prior to becoming the chair this July, I was formerly the vice chair. And, again, honored to be your chair, for the next 3.5-ish years. But obviously left us a vacancy in the vice chair role. And, it's this role it's hard, like I did this. It's not hard. It's just having the weight and the responsibility of what you're responsible to do. And so I know the governor reached out to a few of you, and talked about it. And a lot of you actually reached out to me as well, which the conversations that we had were great, because I definitely want to make sure my ultimate goal was to find the VC that this person is really going to be my ride or die right next to me, helping make, informed decisions, keep me in line and really wanting to be in that role for the right reasons. And I am happy to say today that the governor has decided on a new vice chair for this council. And I would like to welcome this person up to do a little speech so we can get to know this person well. But when I found out who it was and they said yes, I was just over the moon excited. This person and I have a lot in common. And I think we have a shared vision of where we see the council in the state of Wyoming going in the next 3.5 years. So I am happy to say and congratulate Mr. Michael Kircher as your new vice chair to the Wyoming Workforce Development Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate it, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm deeply honored to be here with you today as the newly appointed vice chair for the Wyoming Workforce Development Council. As a lifelong Wyoming resident, born and raised here in Cheyenne, I have witnessed firsthand the resilience and determination of our workforce. My journey has taken me across our great state, working in the construction industry as an electrician and a project manager before joining the NCAR Wyoming Supercomputing Center as the operations manager. These experiences have instilled in me a deep appreciation for the diverse skills and talents of the Wyoming people and what they bring to the table. Over the past 2 years, I've had the privilege of serving on the Strategic Performance and Finance Committee, where I was able to gain a better understanding of the council's funding, as well as the one-stops. I also was an active participant with the council as we crafted the comprehensive strategic plans for the WWDC. And today I pledge my commitment to ensuring that we achieve those goals outlined in the plan. To accomplish this, we will leverage the expertise of our subcommittees. The Communication and Community Relations Committee will play a vital role in amplifying the council's message and fostering strong relationships with stakeholders across the state. The Sector Partnerships and Career Pathways Committee is committed to collaborating with industry leaders, and they will help identify workforce needs and also the career pathways that need developed for Wyoming workers. The Strategic Performance and Finance Committee will ensure that our efforts are data-driven, accountable, and financially sound. The council is also committed to supporting the Department of Workforce Services and its mission to serve the public. We will work closely with the department to enhance the services associated with adult eligible workers, where the department is providing comprehensive training and employment assistance to adult job seekers. They also work with dislocated workers, offering support and resources to this part of our population who have lost their jobs due to layoffs or economic shifts. The department also supports youth services that equip young people with the skills and knowledge they need to succeed in the workforce. And then finally, the role of the one-stop operator to ensure that these centers serve as effective gateways to workforce services, connecting individuals with the resources they need to thrive. These centers must be accessible, inclusive to all individuals, regardless of background or circumstance, ensuring that everyone has a fair opportunity for employment. It's also not a secret that one of Wyoming's biggest exports is our talented young people. They leave seeking opportunities elsewhere, and we need to make a conscious effort to reverse this trend. By fostering a thriving economy with diverse career paths, we can create an environment where our youth choose to stay, build their lives, and contribute to our state's future. So overall, I'm excited to embark on this journey with all of you. Together, we will build a stronger, more prosperous Wyoming by investing in our most valuable asset, our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And once again, congratulations. And so I do again encourage you, Michael and I are kind of your go-to folks. We love feedback. Our number one goal is, as long as we're all aligned, is to have a wonderful and impactful council, and we have the right people in the right place at the right time. And even talking to a lot of the state board chairs for other states, we continue to be one, if not the best seated councils in the nation, as far as they have a lot of openings, and they struggle in finding good people. And I think we've done a great job over the last couple of years of maintaining these seats, finding great people, finding diverse people with different perspectives and viewpoints so that we can sit here and make informed decisions. So just, lean on Michael and myself and the GWS staff if you have any questions, but we're excited to serve you in this capacity. So with that being said, I will go ahead and we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which will be getting a Department of Workforce Services update from Director Gagan.
Chairman, would you like me up front or here? Okay. All right.
Welcome. Thank you all for being here. It's great to see you all. And I echo Chairman Trowbridge in thanking you for completing those surveys. Jennifer shared with me some of the topics that you would like me to touch on, and that's certainly helpful to me and hopefully to you all, that I can kind of touch on the information that's interesting to you. But before we get to that, I know we have a lot of new people on the council, and I wanted to kind of share something that we learned about this morning.
Roxy.
And how the department is working on this. We learned this morning, based on an article on Sweetwater Now that was posted last night, that Genesis Alkali will be making layoffs. We do not know how many people may be laid off, but we do know that it will be happening. To our understanding, they will let everybody who may be laid off let them know before December the 5th. And our workforce center in Rock Springs has made contact with the company, and they will put together probably a series of what we call rapid response events. And we put together a lot of packets to help people who may need to apply for unemployment insurance, and supply people from unemployment insurance who can help them. And then we also set up job fairs and other things like that to try to help people land, just as gently as they may be able to. We do this all across the state. Anytime we learn that a business may be closing, we reach out and we offer these services. But as this just kind of came up this morning, I wanted to let you all know and what our role is when this type of event happens. So the first topic is a question about current initiatives and our plan going into the 2025 legislative session, and whether we have any asks. So Workforce Services did not submit a supplemental budget, so we shouldn't be appearing in front of appropriations. We haven't asked for any additional funding. And also Workforce Services was not on any interim committee's interim topic list. So we are not there are no bills that we have been involved in that involve Workforce Services. But I presume that I think it's likely that individual legislators will file bills with regard to unemployment insurance and or workers' compensation. 2 years ago, when we had a lot of new legislators, we did see a lot of bills. And so what happens is a legislator files one of these bills, the Legislative Service Office will send it to us and ask us to give them a fiscal note. So there's some idea of, maybe any additional revenue or any additional administrative costs. We send that back to LSO, the bill is filed, and then more likely than not, one or more of us will go testify in front of a committee if it were to make it that far. So that's what we kind of know about the legislative session so far. But on the federal front, the state of Rhode Island is promoting a bill to be, promoting some part of the WIOA Reauthorization Act. And what it would do is it would give small states a larger share of WIOA funding. So it's not asking that WIOA funding be increased, just that the formula be tweaked to offer more funds to small states. There are 15 states who are considered small states under WIOA funding. And if this were to happen, Wyoming's Wagner-Peiser funding would remain the same, but the funding for the adult program would increase by about $1.3 million. The youth would increase by $1.4 million, and our dislocated worker would increase by $3.4 million. There would also be an increase in the 15% set aside. I didn't do that math, but if it were to pass, that would happen as well. So where Rhode Island is that they've asked other small states to contact their senators and ask their senators to reach out to the Senate Help Committee with a favorable recommendation. So we will be doing that. And of course, this is very preliminary, very exciting yet preliminary. And, you know, with the news of Genesis Alkali, certainly more funding and dislocated worker would be immensely incredible. It's unlikely that the WIOA reauthorization bill is going to go anywhere until January, when the new legislators and senators are sworn in. So then the next question is with unemployment insurance and workers' compensation. And it says, are there any innovations or improvements planned for these services in 2025, given the recent proposals for rate changes? So I know there are a lot of new members, so I want to step back a little bit and give you some information about what the rate changes part means. In the 2024 legislative session, 3 bills were passed which affect unemployment insurance and workers' comp. The first one that I'll touch on is workers' comp, and it allows for a potential reduction in workers' compensation employer-paid premiums by allowing our actuary to consider investment earnings on what's called the provision for adverse deviation as revenue. And so we very recently had our actuary, look at the fund and recommend rate changes for the upcoming year. And our actuary recommended a 12% decrease. So employers' rates will generally be going down, but this base rate isn't the only thing that affects an employer's rate. An employer's rate could be affected by, I think they call it the EMR, but, incidents, it could be incidents in the industry, which may make it a little bit more dangerous or more likely that someone's going to be hurt. Or it could be that particular employer that may not have the best safety record. So we did have a hearing on October the 17th. There were no objections to this 12% decrease. And sometime soon, those rate notices should be going out. So not necessarily maybe an innovation, but we do expect workers' comp rates to go down. So the unemployment insurance is a little more complicated. And just a little background on unemployment insurance. The balance of the UI Federal Trust Fund as of August 2024 was $499 million, which is large. That's a very, very healthy UI trust fund. In 2022, for the first time in history, the UI Trust Fund had a minimum tax rate of 0. Now, that doesn't mean everyone's UI tax rate is 0, because there could be particular new businesses never have a 0 tax rate. And then also you could have a lot of charges, which would mean that you wouldn't have a 0% tax rate. But there was a 0% tax rate in 2022, 2023, and 2024. I'm not sure precisely when the 2025 rate will be coming out. I think it's quite likely it will be 0 again, based upon the healthy UI trust fund that I spoke to. But then going back to what happened in the legislature last session, there were 2 bills passed. And these bills involve UI, but really what happens with the bills is that they will provide additional funds for businesses to provide training and internships and those types of things for their businesses. So the first one is about the state UI trust fund. The state of Wyoming is, I think, the only state that has a state UI trust fund. It was created long ago when the state had some issues with UI and had to borrow money from the federal government, which of course didn't make legislators even back then very comfortable. So we have a state UI trust fund that we've never used any funds from. We've never needed to, but it has about $51 million in it. And the interest that we would earn on that trust fund would go to our workforce development training fund to provide training for Wyoming businesses. And what this bill did is it allowed the state treasurer to invest this trust fund into Pool A. And Pool A generally delivers a higher rate of return. So we won't know. This went into effect July 1 of 2024. We won't know until July 1 of 2025, kind of the additional amount of funds that we may be able to use for training But if you look over about a 10-year average, we expect about $850,000 in addition for each year that we can be able to use for workforce development training grants. Then the second bill that passed was about UI funds and kind of how they flow when we collect employer payments. So what this bill did was it just kind of changed some of the funding, and it was going to allow some of the funding, instead of going back into the federal UI trust fund, which is very, very healthy, it was going to allow more of that, more of those funds to go into the employment support fund. And the employment support fund is money that we use to fully run the UI program. The money that we get from the Department of Labor is not enough for us to be able to run UI. So we use these employment support funds to run UI, but we also use the employment support funds to fund some parts of our employment and training programs that are also not fully funded by the federal government. Like our CSEP program is a program where we don't receive enough money. There may be, you know, things in the workforce centers that we're unable to use WIOA funds to purchase. So these funds also prop up our workforce centers and those E&T grants. So this law doesn't go in effect until January 1st of 2025. So we haven't had any additional funds come in yet. And I forgot one important part. The bill also allows funds to go to the Workforce Development Trust Fund as well. So we can also be able to offer more training for employers. It doesn't go into effect until January 1st of 2025. So we don't know, we haven't realized sort of any additional funding. Right now, our ESF collections are at a historic low because of the 0% tax rate. So I don't expect that this is going to result in a lot more funding for either the ESF or training funds in the near, year or two, but it probably will. And if we looked 10 years back, and if we'd been doing this for the previous 10 years, it would have resulted in about 2.5 million more, or 2.5 million going to the training fund and an additional 2.5 million to ESF. Again, that we're not going to see that for this upcoming year and probably not the next. But it is additional funding that we are grateful for. So that's an update on where we are with those 3 initiatives from last year, which is essentially we haven't really received any of those additional funds yet, but we are looking forward to it in the near future. Okay. The next question, which kind of dovetails into that, is it says the Workforce Development Training Fund, how the program is being optimized to meet the changing needs of employers and employees. And our Workforce Development Training Fund is made up of 4 different grants. We have apprenticeship training grants, and those are grants that we can use to pay for the related instruction for approved, DOL approved apprenticeships. We have business training grants, and those are grants that any business can apply for to upskill their employees. We have a pre-hire and pre-obligation training fund. So I guess actually there's 5. Pre-hire grants are an area where we know that we have a workforce deficiency, and so we are offering training in those areas. As an example of a pre-hire grant, we have some of those with, we have one with LCCC for CDL training, because we know that there's a large gap that we have there. We have what we call pre-obligation grants, and those don't happen very often, but they are a tool that economic development can use. If a business were expanding and they needed to kind of retrain their workforce, we could pay for a lot of that training. And if we have new employers who are coming to the state, we'd be able to provide a lot of that training, more so than we could with the business training grants in kind of larger amounts for those businesses. And then we have internship grants, where we are able to pay up to $18 an hour for an intern for businesses. We have 2 internship grants. One of the grants comes from the development funds that I've been speaking about, and the other grant comes from the Wyoming Innovation Partnership, and that grant is specific to students. Our other internship grant, though, is not specific to students. So those are the types of training grants that we have. And some new things that we are doing is we are launching a new grant management system, hopefully soon, that will be much easier for employers to use. It'll be much more intuitive, and it will, just hold on to a lot of the information so you don't have to retype it every single time you complete one of our applications. We've also been kind of expanding some of our apprenticeship grants. Currently, we have apprenticeship grants we just started some teacher apprenticeships, which is exciting and I think very much needed. HVAC and plumbing are ones we've been doing for a long time. We have one in healthcare, and then we have a cybersecurity one as well. Prior to, we started to receive additional funding on July 1 of 2024. Prior to that, we were receiving applications every month, kind of totaling about $500,000, but we only had enough funds to be able to approve about 150. And with these additional funds, we can now award about 300,000 each month in these grants. So I think a lot of businesses were kind of frustrated when they were applying for grants, and we just simply didn't have enough money, every time to be able to do it. But we have about twice as much money now. So we can help with that training a lot more than we had been. Then moving on to the next question, it has to do with vocational rehabilitation and disability services. And it asks about insights into new efforts to support employment for individuals with disabilities. Our VR caseloads are increasing to the tune of about 15%. So we do have a lot of clients. But I really want to talk about services for children and youth, as we have been able to do more in this realm recently. The last legislative session, the budget allowed VR to bring our pre-ed services in-house by creating 4 new positions. And then we eliminated contracts that we had been using to provide those services. We believe that bringing those positions in-house provides better oversight for the students who are on IEPs and 504 plans. Pre-EDS is a WIOA, it's something that we do pursuant to WIOA. VR has to spend 15% of its federal funding to provide these services to children and youth, and its job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling on enrolling in training or post-secondary programs, workforce readiness training, and instruction on self-advocacy. So we have, students who may have disabilities who are then able to, explain what type of accommodations they may need and those types of things. We have also, though, our VR division has received a $10 million grant that is totally geared towards youth and children and improving the employment skills, mental health, and economic outcomes for Wyoming's children and youth. And they are able to expand mental health services that we can offer to youth. They've been able to offer some virtual mental health services, particularly for rural areas. And they have been identifying and implementing additional avenues of educating this population on the link between mental health and employment. So those are kind of what I would say are maybe the bigger issues that were brought forward. There was one about future programs and potential funding issues. We don't really have, there are no maybe new future programs that we're considering right now. I don't anticipate right now any potential funding issues. The biennium just started in July, and assuming that the budget doesn't change during this session, we should be well funded through the biennium. And then another question was, of those participants eligible for WIOA funds, how much is the average amount of funds spent on an individual and how many are placed in gainful employment at completion of their training. And I didn't have this kind of information readily available to me, but I believe that Trevor has looked into that and may be able to address that issue. Tomorrow? Perfect. Okay, sorry. Trevor will present on that tomorrow. So that was quite a lot. Again, thank you very much for kind of telling me what you may want to hear. Are there any questions? Okay, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Director. My question is around the mental health services. Are those being provided virtually? How is that working, especially in our rural communities?
I might, Nikki, if you don't, I'd like Nikki Harper from VR to take that.
Thank you, Director. Chairman, council members. So most of the services right now are provided through a virtual platform. We have contracted with a entity, I think the company name is Nivadi. So we can then access services, or our students can access services on a as needed basis, even in maybe I don't want to say critical care, but if there's a student who's maybe having some suicidal ideation, these services are available. So it's kind of a as needed, or needed based upon the level of need for the student. So it's identified through the school district, the counselor who they're working with, but then making those services available to those school districts and then hoping to expand from there. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Director Gagan. Yeah, and I think you can kind of also see the benefits of that pre-homework, right? So having, targeted information. So once again, just reinforcing that you complete those before our quarterly meetings. All right. So moving on to agenda item number 4 is going to be our spending plan and expenditures for the council. I also do want to budget in a bit of time. I know we're all busy, but just give you like 1 or 2 minutes. Make sure you just do a quick read through. We've got 2 budgets here to look at. We have the WWDC Expenditures Council September 2024, and we also have the WWDC Expenditures Local. So 2 minutes. So 1:53, and then I'll be having Colette come up and kind of talk to us about that. But go ahead and just take 2 minutes and make sure you're familiar and have any questions around these expenditures. All right, it is 1:53, so hopefully had a time prior to the meeting to review, but also a few minutes now. And I will go ahead and welcome Colette and team if you want to kind of inform the council around spending plan expenditures, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to do some quick introductions. I'm Jennifer Cassidy. I'm the Deputy CFO of the Department of Workforce Services. And usually you see me doing these presentations, and I'm passing the torch off to Colette, who is our new grant manager. She oversees WIOA and prepares the council's budgets every month. And then the accounting manager, Katrina Kohler. So you'll see her at these meetings as well. And I'll be here for moral support and help answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We'll start by looking at the council budget for the last quarter, July, August, and September. We are currently spending out of grant years 2022, 23, and 24. We have spent 80.81% of the total budget, but that's likely to decrease next quarter because we'll be receiving additional adult and dislocated worker participant funds in October. The expenditures for the quarter are $1,221,397. In September, you'll see an increased amount for space rentals, and that is due to our invoicing. We pay them once a quarter. We pay leases once a quarter. And if there are no other questions, we can move on to the council budget.
Do we have any questions about this budget specifically? And welcome, Colette. It's always good to see a new name on the agenda. So, yeah, any questions for this budget before we move on to the next one? All right, you can continue, please.
I had a question.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Dr. Michelle Aldrich.
Yeah. Chairman, through you, I just wanted to ask, in spending out the 3 years of money, 22, 23, and 24 funds, does it look like there will be any that we will have to return or not draw down from our federal partners?
No, at this point, our spending is right on point and we should be fine. We should not be returning any money.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for that.
For the council budgets, we are spending out of grant years 23 and 24. 2022 has been fully expended. For our July expenditures, they're 38,518. For August, 27,908, and for September, 53,515. There's increased expenditures in September due to payroll expenses, and that's because people allocate their time based on projects that they work on. If we scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see our current projects, and we still have $132,816.65 left remaining for those projects. Along with the budgets, we received a few questions on the past survey. The first one I'd like to address, the first question was, are there upcoming changes or considerations regarding the fiscal process for the next budget cycle that the council should be aware of? And at this time, we are not aware of any upcoming changes that might affect the budget. The second question is, a clearer understanding of how expenditures align with long-term goals would be helpful in ensuing alignment with our initiatives. And I would like a little more clarification on that question before we can answer it. And the last and final question was the amount spent on direct client services versus overhead administration. On the local budget, if you look, there is the allowable activities, and we have it broken down by operations and then participants. So for last quarter, we spent $853,925 on operations, and $300,482 went to participants. Mr. Chairman, do you have any questions?
And Mr. Chairman, if I could add on that last question, as part of our last biennium ask, the agency did ask the legislators for additional general funds to support all of our employment and training programs, in particular WIOA. And it's an ongoing request that the legislator approved. So we received an additional 5.3 million. So we are anticipating that on the local side, as far as operations versus participants, those numbers are going to look a little different going forward. We don't know exactly what that looks like. But our hopes and anticipation in asking for this money is that we will have additional funds available for participants.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, and a good point that you bring up as well. Based on the questions that you submit in your pre-work too, there might be certain topics that are just large, so this is another kind of thing that maybe we can look at that and have a presentation or some kind of informational thing around that. So just some of them, yeah, we'd be here until midnight talking about some of them, right? And then my only question would be, again, you don't have any concerns about the current project, the remaining budgets not being spent by our vendors?
Mr. Chairman, I believe we're on track. Of course, the micro-credentialing has been on that list for a little while, and I think that's something that Jennifer is working on, hopefully getting the last of those invoices so we can wrap that up and use our older money on that based on the service dates for that program. But the other projects are relatively new, and I believe a handful of them at least are next gen support grants. So I anticipate those will pick up.
Great, thank you. Council discussion or questions for our fiscal team?
Mr. Chairman, follow-up
Yes, Nikki
question.
Hubbard?
Just a clarifying question in looking at the current projects. I'm just curious, is there a way for council members to know of these projects, what we are hoping to utilize in federal fiscal year 22, 23, 24? So we can say, like, for instance, we look at Lift Wyoming, 21,450 was estimated, that's still remaining. Tri-county partnerships, that was estimated, that's still remaining. Like, what is the spend date for that? I'm just kind of curious, can that be further broken out so that council has an understanding of, or is it that we're waiting on invoices because we know that some folks don't invoice us in a timely manner, especially when we're running a 3-year budget and we don't understand what's the time frame to get these funds used by? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. So I think for the most part, the understanding and anticipation is that the projects will be concluded within that year, that fiscal year. And because the WIOA funding is structured the way that it is, so we get a new grant every single year, but we have 3 years to spend it. So for the most part, when we're looking at invoices, whether a project is approved in this fiscal year, if we have money from 2022, that grant year is still open and available, we will use the oldest money first. So in some cases, it's a little hard to tie it to exactly which grant year it will be coming out of, but I believe in general, the understanding is that those projects will be concluded within that fiscal year.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of comment on what you kind of brought up, Nikki. I think it's a great idea. I mean, if you've joined the council, you may not know what Lift Wyoming is, right? You know, that was this, we decided on that, I think, a year, maybe 2 years ago. So maybe there is something we can do as an addendum or in a future project plan. You know, these are the projects that the council has approved. High level, here's the goal, why it was approved, et cetera. So we can take that back as feedback for sure. I like it. Any other council discussion around expenditures or budget? All right, hearing none, then I would welcome a motion to approve our two council September 2024 and local September 2024 budgets.
Motion to approve the third quarter budgets.
All right, so moved by Mr. Lawrence. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, seconded by Nikki Harper. Any further council discussion before we move to approvals? All right, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the approval of the expenditures has passed. Thank you both, and welcome again, Colette. All right, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 5, and this is going to be, looks like we have two contracts for 2025 that need council review and potential approval or discussion. We have one with Collaborative Economics, the John Melville, and our Next Gen grant for $91,920. And then we also need to review Onboard. And that's our online board software for $22,377.98, which is a 6% increase from last year? Is it a yearly contract that we have with Onboard?
Correct. We have, Mr. Chairman, we have a yearly contract. However, the RFP had the 6% increase every year. So this is a known increase and was still cheaper than alternatives, even with the 6% annual increase.
Great. And just to clarify, Jennifer, is there anyone speaking on behalf of either of these?
It can be me.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind, Jennifer, informing us, would be great. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I bring before you today voting item for the 2025 contracts. These are the cost of doing business contracts for the council. So Collaborative Economics, they provide our sector partnerships framework, and then we also receive technical assistance from Collaborative Economics. This meets our requirement for the WIOA regulations to support sector partnerships throughout the state. Onboard, again, has a 6% increase, but it is the board management software that we use to keep all of us organized, and it houses all of the council information.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. So since we have two contracts that we need to kind of look at as far as number wise goes, let's start with the first one. Any council discussion around the renewal of collaborative economics, which Jennifer mentioned is John Melville and supporting our next gen sector partnerships. Any discussion around that? Yes, Dr. Aldridge.
Chairman Trowbridge, I think it's important for new people to know that we did recently go out for RFP for that. And so that has been reviewed just in the last year and a half or so.
Actually, that's a great point. Thank you, Dr. Aldridge. Yep. I mean, I think it's always good to do our due diligence and make sure that, we do have options out there and we feel that we're making, of course, the best option for Wyoming. Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Who's that?
Me.
Oh, yes. Yes, Tina. Oh, just turn your microphone on. Thank you.
When we looked at those RFPs, John Melville's cost actually went down a little bit, didn't it?
That is correct.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
And he is on track to spend 100% of his contract probably before January.
All right. Yeah. Any other information around this contract or council discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may, I forgot to mention that these two grants went before the Strategic Performance and Finance Committee, and they approved these contracts to come forward to the council for approval.
All right. Awesome. That's great. Yeah. So this has already gone through strategic performance and finance and coming in front of the whole body for formal approval on those. I'll go ahead. Any discussion around onboard, and also to kind of provide some background information for new council members. Jennifer, prior to onboard, how did we manage our agendas, media materials, et cetera?
In a very, very, very manual way. Also, we utilized Google Docs. So, and Google spreadsheets and Google Forms, and would you still get Google Forms, but mostly it was in Google Drives. And we inundate you with information, and then it is a painful process to change agendas when I did it manually with Word.
A lot of paper. We're saving trees, people. This is great. And actually, is there a council member that just wants to speak to who's been here prior to the onboard kind of transition a couple years ago? Before, after contrast, yeah, Tina?
Onboard is well worth the money. I made a bad joke in one of our committee meetings about I wish I could get a 6% increase every year, but I think it's well worth the money.
Yep. Anyone else have any comments on onboard? I mean, obviously, as a council, it's your decision whether or not we continue to use it. As long as you're finding it valuable, I do find it. Yes, Mr. Wild.
So I remember back the days of old where we used telegraph wires and, things like that. Okay. So the onboard really is a useful tool, but it's only as useful as the people want it to be. So as long as we continue to use it and we're sharing information and those types of things, I don't see any reason not to go ahead and approve it.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Wild, for that historical context. Yep. And it's true. I did talk about, if we're going to continue to, I wanted to make sure you all felt it was a valuable tool. It's helping you be more effective and resourceful as a council member. And as there's a bunch of other features in onboard that we haven't potentially quite yet tapped into that I'm interested in. So us as a council recommitting to onboard, these are things I want to look at next year. And, one of them that we're still need to make sure that we were going to stay in compliance and stuff is there is online voting, so there are a few subcommittees that might be eligible to actually hold the vote via onboard versus having to try to do the doodle and let's meet here and go there and we meet for 15 minutes to do an approval. So there are things that, I just want to make sure if we all decide to approve this, these are things that we will be looking into next year. I'm going to squeeze every drop out of this contract I can. And it's also very rare to have a piece of software and technology that people usually push back on that just works. It does what it needs to do. So, and also there's a lot of promoters right on board. I even tell the NGA every single year, I'm like, why aren't you using this? They're like, oh yeah, we'll send out the PowerPoint slides afterwards. And it's like, then you wait a week and then you lose all context. And it's like, it's already here for you. So, all right. Well, just last thing, any further discussion on either of the two contracts before we move to a motion? All right, hearing none, then I would welcome a motion to approve both contracts for collaborative economics and onboard in the amounts that are shown on the agenda.
So moved.
All right, so moved by Mr. Wild. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Lawrence. All right, any further council discussion? All right, all in favor to approve both of these contracts, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, both contracts have been approved. All right, thank you, council. And also, I hope another thing is we try to move all the voting stuff to the first day. Just kind of get this. So hopefully you also like that little agenda change that we've made as well. So our next voting item is going to be presented by Ivy, and that is going to be agenda item number 6, which is discussion around our one-stop operations procurement. And for those of you who've been with the council for a bit, or you were there in September, you've heard about this. It's now once again time to become informed regarding either putting out for RFP or a bid exception request, which is we've done historically. So Ivy, would you mind in all yours?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, council members. So as the chairman said, we did review this document in September when we were in Fort Washakie. And so I won't go through all of the detail that we went through there at that time. But just as a brief recap, this is a requirement under WIOA. It requires that all one-stop operators are selected or designated through a competitive process. And so in Wyoming, the competitive process that we have is the processes that we have are through the RFP process or through, as the chairman said, what has historically been used by the council is the bid exception process. And so just to talk a little bit about what those two things look like, so I'm gonna reference page 3 on that procurement document. And I'm sorry, I do want to back up just briefly. So again, for those of you who have been on the council for a while, this is not a new document to you. And I think we discussed in September that there were very, very few changes that were made to this document based on the one that you would have previously seen in 2022, when then Administrator McKee presented this information to you all. And I think that one of the things that she mentioned this in September as well, but I think it's worth reiterating as well. When she presented it in 2022, she made a really important point about that it's really our job in this presentation to be Switzerland and just simply give you the information on the options that you have. So I thought that that was worth reiterating again. So then on the procurement options that are available, that the first option would be to develop an RFP. Now, because Wyoming is a single area state, most states that have local workforce development boards, this is the only option that is available to them. They are required to go through the competitive process. Because we're a single area state and there are additional challenges, as we all know, when you are serving a rural state like Wyoming, that may require a different approach. And so DOL has allowed for the use of the bid exception process as long as that fits in with our state procurement policies, which of course it does. So and part of the reason why it's important for us to say that, you know, we're Switzerland in this is because what happens in the single area states is that we have to be really careful about making sure that the firewall is protected between those operations and you all as the council and that policy piece. And so, however, again, as I said, the exception process has been there exactly for states like Wyoming, where we lack things like economy of scale and larger vendor pools as well. So I would like to, I'm going to try to incorporate the one question that we did get in the pre-survey work, which was a question about, well, if we were to do the RFP, who would this go to? Who would we send this to? And I think that that's a really excellent question and a good segue to discuss some additional challenges as well that I think that you should be aware of. So technically, if the RFP process were selected, right now, the public purchase that is used by the state of Wyoming, we would certainly use that as an outlet for the RFP. Then we would also look to the council to say, okay, who else do we need to be able to send this to? And so I will just point back out on page 2, we talked a little bit last time about who would be eligible entities for a one-stop operator. And I'm not going to reread that list for you all, but it talks about there are some certain government agencies, it can be nonprofits. There's a wide variety there. What I think is really important to keep in mind about challenges in that process is a couple of things, and I mentioned some of those, but in Wyoming, again, because we're small, if we were to open up an RFP process, one of the challenges would be finding local operators with experience in running a one-stop center. So I think that that's an important challenge for you guys to recognize as you deliberate on the process that you would like to pursue. Also, another challenge would be if someone new was selected, what would what type of experience would they bring with them, and what type of training would need to be provided? And then probably the biggest question of all is, what would that funding look like for a one-stop operator? So then in brief conclusion, I just wanted to go through the next steps to completion, or the steps to completion, depending on how the council chooses to proceed. So if if an RFP was determined that was the direction that it wanted to go, so it outlines the steps there on page 4. Again, the need to determine the source of funding to run 2 systems concurrently. And then, so then the next step after that, once that was determined, would be to review and revise, if necessary, the role of the one-stop operator, develop the RFP, release the RFP, score the responses to the RFP, and then the selection of the contractor, and finally the MOU. Now, on the sole source or the bid exception, if that was the direction that the council chose to proceed with, then the next step is to develop the bid exception request and review, revise, if necessary, the role of the one-stop operator, and then the development of the MOU. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I would stand for any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you, Ivy. And, again, reiterating, this is why we presented the bulk of this information to you all in September. It's a big decision. And now using this time to kind of formally come together, like, as I liked your analogy, Ivy, where the Switzerland, so now the decision comes to this table. So you as a council will decide whether or not we continue. Obviously, I don't know. Do you have any information? When was the last time we went out to RFP, or have we ever? Do you know? Does anyone know any historical data? I know as long as I've been on the council, we've never. I don't think we've gone to RFP, have we? Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Aldridge.
That we actually talked about doing it, but we went through the bid exception authorization, and I think it's been, I want to say 3 years, maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know it's been quite a while. So I guess I would just encourage, some final discussion and thoughts. We have to make a choice. Are we going out for RFP and looking at potential other options? And then obviously, as Ivy kind of outlined in the documents that you've had in front of you, there is a lot of homework there for us to work through to make that all happen. Or do we feel more comfortable continuing with what we've done in the past, at least within the last 3 years, a bid exception request, and continue to move forward in that way? So I would encourage discussion. Yes, it looks like Mr. Wild, do you have a comment or discussion? Yep.
I'll lead us out on the discussion. So I'm in favor of doing the bid exception again. DWS has been doing a great job as the one-stop operator. And if we don't have any issues with how it's being ran and what it is that's being done, I don't see any reason to change it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wild, for your comments. Yep, and kind of going back to that too, you know, if you do feel that there would be a potential better operator for our one-stops and you feel like that would, again, we as a council, we're responsible for choosing the very best entity to help the one-stops that obviously serve our participants in WIOA. It's your choice to decide who does that and how does it work. Yes, Dr. Aldrich?
I'm just curious if there is a limit to how many times you can do a bid exception before you have to go out for an RFP.
That is a great question. I don't know. Does anyone have context on that? Because I'm in a personal belief of mine is I see it's important to continue to see what options are out there. There might be new options that were not present, 3, 4, or 5 years ago, but I don't know. Is there a conclusive answer to that? Do you know, Ivy?
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Aldrich, that is a good question, and I will need to double check this, but I believe that the answer to your question is no. I have not come across anything that indicates that there is a limitation on the number of times that it can go out. The requirement that does exist is that it must be done once every 4 years as a minimum, or according to state procurement. And so that is why we'll continue to go through this process at least every 4 years. But beyond that, I don't believe that there are any other caveats that we have to take into account, but I will certainly do some additional homework and let you know if there is something there.
As a follow-up, is there any, I don't see, other than, and I'm not saying that this isn't a significant one, but other than staff time and energy, I don't see any negatives for going out for bid to see what else is out there.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Aldrich. And I know Jennifer wants to chime in on that as well. And then who else had their hands raised? Okay, cool. I'll call on you, Corey, in a bit.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I just wanted to clarify, I'm not aware there's any limit to the bid exception request that we do, but this discussion and this vote on whether you do an RFP or bid exception request must be done every 4 years or 3 years. It depends on the state's procurement process, but we have to do this the most often. That's as far as I'm aware. And again, Ivy and I can double check, but I believe the question was about the bid exception request, and I'm not aware that there's a limit of how many times we do that before we do an RFP.
Okay. Yeah, I think, kind of speaking to what Dr. Aldrich said is making sure that we are very much compliant, if there is a rule or law that we should be doing, I definitely want to do that. And yes, and then Corin, did you have something you wanted to add to the conversation?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We use kind of a little bit more of an informal process sometimes when we get stuck between the spaces. Is there anybody else out there that does this? So to Dr. Aldrich's point, it's not as time consuming for staff, but it does kind of put out a hook out there to see if anybody bites. And then that helps us to decide whether or not we should go to a formal RFP. And it's a request for information. So you can do it in a variety of ways, but what I'm hearing is the conversation about at least kind of wanting to know. And this is a way to kind of know without really committing a lot of time and energy resources if there really isn't anyone out there that's interested. So just an option that we use at our agency.
Yeah, I don't know. I was going to say, yeah, go ahead, Lauren. Did you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was actually going to say the same thing. My one concern with not going out for RFI is if others have complained or if you've heard anything back from anybody across the state. And then also if our legislators have questions about why it hasn't gone out to RFP or RFI, and having it be sole source for a long period of time. And so I think the RFI process, it might be beneficial to minimize concerns and scrutiny. And that's my thought process. So.
Yeah, great.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you.
A follow-up, kind of going in a slightly different direction. And maybe my opinion is a little biased and maybe it shouldn't be, but I just want to be transparent with that because I am an agent. I do work for the agency. I'm curious if the council has a clear understanding or if we do go out for RFI, if there's a clear understanding of what the one-stop needs to perform and what the WIOA requirements ask for that provider to perform. So what I'm getting at is, as workforce services, as DWS, like Ron indicated, are there problems? Have there been problems? I mean, if there are, maybe we truly do need to look at it. And as Dr. Aldridge said, maybe we need to see what's out there, but truly is there an understanding from entities out there? Because this work happens boots on the ground. The work happens out in the field. Sometimes it's like if the vendor is somewhere out there, I know sometimes it's a little bit challenging. So does everyone truly understand when we say dislocated worker, adult work, adult, when we say youth, what that work entails and what we're looking at in terms of just meeting that title requirements, because that's what we're going out for bid for. It's not all the responsibilities just for that particular title of responsibilities. Thank you.
Yep, like we saw in the presentation and the documentation, there's a lot to consider. I don't notice, I want to be very clear, because right now we have two options that were approved in the agenda for either RFP or bid exception. I don't know, are we allowed to add a third option of an RFI, and like what would that look like?
Yeah.
Okay, so if the council would like, we could add a third option, which is RFI, which would be a request for information, RFP, or bid exception request. So now that you know there are three options on the table, weigh them. And obviously raise your hand if you'd like to comment or provide perspective. It's something that, yeah, as we mentioned, we do, and it's our responsibility every 3 to 4 years. It's a big one. It's a big one. Yes, Tony?
I'll just add that I'm in favor of the bid exception option. I think, like Ron said, DWS has been doing a terrific job. And the way that I've kind of looked at this in different contexts is if a vendor is, I'll just use the term vendor, is not doing a terrific job, then the interesting information that can come out of an RFP becomes a lot more valuable. But weighing the sort of headaches and amount of work that would go into that, I'm not really sure that I quite see the value. Maybe if there is an interest in an RFI, I'd ask the question, could we put forth the concept of continuing with a bid exception and then doing an RFI at some point in the near future when it's a less time sensitive matter or something along those lines? I see you shaking your head. But just trying to think of a kind of a median solution that might meet all the interests.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Any further council discussion? Yes, Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question about the timeliness of this. Is this urgent? I heard that it was approved 3 years ago. Do we have more time to get, if we do an RFI, to minimize the workload? And I don't want everybody to have to do two different things either, so.
Do we know an answer to that question? Do we have to absolutely 100% make a decision today?
There are pros and cons. I think leaning towards, so yes and no to the timeliness. We can't really move forward with the multi-agency MOU. That's the next topic until this is addressed. But it's important to not miss any steps, or if the feds do not believe that we held the standard of following the procurement process, they will negate anything that the council did and we'd have to start over anyway. So that's why it's a yes and no. There's some things that have to happen after this, but we have to stay true to the procurement process regardless, or anything we did could be negated and more time would be wasted anyway. Again, Sweden, it's up to you, but that's why the answer is yes or no. There are steps, but we have to follow this process.
Did you have something, Dr. Aldrich?
I just wanted to say, I think in our current environment, and going into a new legislative session with new legislators, I think it's in our best interest to do our due diligence with a minimum of an RFI, which is not overly time consuming. Just so that we can say that we have been done our due diligence and that we're not just, and not because there's any concerns about our current services being offered, but I think that we need to be able to demonstrate that we are always looking to make sure that we are getting the best deal for Wyoming citizens and for our legislative body.
Yep. Did you have something, Mr. Lawrence?
Yes, thank you, Chairman E.T. This is the first exposure that I've had to this piece of business for the council. And I guess I'm leaning kind of two different ways. One, if it isn't broke, but the RFI also makes sense to me. There's 49 other councils in the United States. Do they predominantly contract with our government agency and DWSs, or?
Well, I believe you were kind of speaking to that, Ivy, in yours, which is since we are a single area state, all these, so there's like, what did you say, 15 states, I think 10 or 15 states that are designated as a small state. If you're larger than that, you have to go out to RFP. So we're, as a small state, we do have the bid exception process. Yes. I don't know if that answers your questions or if you want to add, Ivy.
If I could just add just a little bit to that. That is correct. In most of our larger states, and even in Montana and Idaho, for example, even though they're considered small states, they also have what are referred to as local workforce development boards. And so the really large states, your California's, Washington's, they all kind of filter down to what are local workforce development boards. And in those larger states, this responsibility falls to the local workforce development boards. Now, the state workforce board provides guidance to those local workforce development boards, but the procurement process is required in those larger states. They are not allowed to request a bid exception, for example. And then so with the single area states, because we are small, there are, of course, as everyone in this room knows, that in Wyoming, where we have these long streets between our neighborhoods, that means that we also oftentimes don't have things like economies of scale. And so DOL has recognized that, and they have allowed for the exception request or the waiver process to be submitted to DOL, which was done in 2015, I believe, by this board. And so it's a little bit when you ask about other states, we might be comparing apples to oranges. And even in the small states, I did mention in the meeting, in Fort Washakie, that there were 3 examples in a recent evaluation that was performed for DOL that looked at how a couple of other single area states proceeded with the procurement process. And the first one was that they had done a successful RFP process and they had bids. The second one was that they received approval from the governor's office to issue a sole source solicitation. So that was pretty easy. The third state, they were going through, and it doesn't really say which direction they chose to go as far as the RFP process or the bid exception. But what the evaluation noted was that they didn't, DOL had notified them that they did not run a successful competition because they were not mindful of the appropriate firewalls. And so they had to go back through the entire process to select. Does that kind of help answer? I apologize that there's not necessarily a straightforward answer to your question, but.
Yeah, it provides some clarity. Thank you.
Yeah, we are, obviously Wyoming is always unique, and in this way we are, as Ivy was mentioning, like if this is your first time going through this process, most states have local, like basically we would have this room that would represent Southeast Wyoming, Southwest, Northeast, Northwest. You have your local boards that then would make these kind of decisions. And then you have your big state board, that everyone kind of reports up to. Since Wyoming, we don't have local boards. We are the state board. We choose. So in a way, it does make things a little bit faster, but also puts a lot of weight that, 600,000 people we oversee in a sense. So.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, Director Gain.
So South Dakota, What does South Dakota and North Dakota do? And how many single area states are there?
Mr. Chairman, Director Gagan, the single area question, how many single area states are there is an excellent question. And I just came across a place where I could actually find it because it's very difficult. I think there are 7 actually, but if you include US Virgin Islands, Guam, maybe American Samoa, we get up to 11. So there are very few. I actually do not know exactly the process that South Dakota or North Dakota use, but would be happy to reach out and ask what their process is.
Okay, I mean, it may be interesting to know what the other, I mean, there are only 7 single area states, which I think makes a big kind of difference in the question. Another thing that I wanted to highlight on page 8 of the document that Ivy provided, it talks about some different ways that DWS supplements the workforce centers. One is with employment support funds, which I spoke about in at the beginning of the meeting. We do use approximately $400,000 of employment support funds. And then in addition, we receive about $2.5 million in general funds to help run the workforce centers. And that money wouldn't be available to a contractor, which leads me to believe that there's, I don't know how anyone would be able to offer the services needed for the amount of money that we receive from Department of Labor to run these programs.
No, thank you for your comments, Director Gagan. All right. Well, we've had time to kind of discuss the council. So essentially how this is going to work, there are technically, I guess, now with the information that you have, there's 4 options, and I'm willing to listen to a motion on proposing moving forward in one of the 4 ways. Option number 1, being that you would like to delay this until our Q1 2025 meeting, which, as you heard, there's pros and cons to that as well. If you feel like you do need additional time to be able to weigh it, again, we did kind of preemptively. That's why we presented this in September, so that we could make a decision now on this, right? But, we could do that in the January Q1. That's option 1. I would accept a motion to move right into the RFP process as outlined. 3, have a motion to go into an RFI and continue to work out what that's going to look like, or a motion to move forward with a bid exception. So I will, and then because, I'm sure all of you have different varying opinions on, which way we should go, this will be a roll call vote. And so the option to abstain will also be there as well. So I will welcome a motion of any of those 4 to begin the process.
Mr. Chairman, I would
Yes,
like to
ma'am.
make a motion that the council consider an RFI for this process.
All right, so moved by Brenda is considering an RFI. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second.
All right, seconded by Tina. So council discussion. The motion forward is that we move forward with the RFI process, request for information. Any council discussion on the RFI option? Yes, Mr. Vice Chair.
So I guess one of my if we're talking about doing due diligence through an RFI process, there's other ways in my mind to do due diligence with a sole source. We can cite the lack of funding that is talked about on page 8 here, that would be lost through a potential RFP or award to a vendor. We could also reach out to these other states to get their input on how they do their coverage. And, we could almost come up with some kind of, formal letter from the council to follow up with that, to kind of show that we've done our due diligence and this is why we have moved forward with, maybe not the RFI and something else. I guess that's just a point on maybe not having to go through an RFI and going directly to sole source. But I don't know the temperature of the legislator and if they are looking at more scrutiny and they are wanting a more formal thing. I mean, I don't know if that's something that also needs to be researched a little bit more.
Brenda, did you have a comment?
I did kind of have a follow-up to piggyback on Nikki's comment. when we're talking about the one-stops, are we only talking about the positions specifically that handle WIOA? Or is it all of the people in this one-stop shop that handles like unemployment, DVR, all of the positions? I want a little bit clarification on that. What positions exactly are we talking about in the one-stops?
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Morgan, this is specific to WIOA.
Okay.
So that is all that you are, what you're voting on today is specific to WIOA.
Do you happen to know how many positions we currently manage right now?
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Morgan, no, I do not know that specifically, but maybe I can phone a friend if somebody else out there does know that, and if not, if nobody does know that right off the top of their mind, maybe we can, that's something that we can follow up with.
The only reason I ask is I have run into an issue recently in the Casper office that they are a little bit overworked and they were having a hard time getting to help a youth participant trying to get into our program. So I'm curious, how many positions are we currently funding and are we funding enough?
Yeah, great point.
Mr. Chairman, just a follow up to Brenda. I think we need to clarify when we say to WIOA that there are 4 titles and that we are specific to which title we are specifically speaking to, because this is not speaking to Title 4, which is the program that I'm over, or that it doesn't speak to Title 2, and that that we're looking at only certain components of Title 1, Title 3. So I think we need to be a little specific there as well. And if I may add a little bit more, I think there are some timelines we need to consider, because even if we go out for an RFI, then we decide we do get some information that's pertinent, or they come back and say that's not adequate funding for us to run the program. Following this, there's a MOU that needs to happen. The MOU then leads into additional information that Robin's team and Jen needs to work on for what they call the IFA, the infrastructure agreement, which has to be all title partners and additional partners involved. And those kind of things are federal requirements that have certain timelines. So I'm just concerned, I just want to put out to the council that going out for an RFI, getting additional information, determining yes, we go that route, or no, we're going sole source, that then takes up additional time. And then some of those other requirements are coming up on us much faster as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for these comments. Yeah, Dr. Aldridge, did you have something or?
I was just going to say, I think it's important to remember that when we're talking about this, we're talking about that these are federal funds and that we know that there are going to be some probably pretty significant changes going on in that arena as well. And I think that the point that Director Gagan made is really important about how much, quite honestly, the state of Wyoming is supplementing what the work that we're doing. And I don't know that we have a legislative body that might see that as being a positive right now.
Thank you,
Mr.
Dr.
Chairman.
Aldridge. Did you have something, Director Gagan? I'm just keeping that cue.
I wanted to get back on the number of employees. We have 116 employees in the workforce centers, and then some additional folks that work in our fiscal department that, specifically handle workforce center issues.
Thank you, Director Gagan. Jennifer?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to further clarify what Nikki had said. So what we're looking at right now is on page, so these are the funds that would be available from past numbers. So just giving you an idea of the funding, which is on page 8 and 9 of the document that has been provided. We are talking about the one-stop operator, which especially in our state is hard to separate, but it's the overarching who is the operator of the building where all the programs are sitting. And then, or most of the programs when we can co-locate. And then the adult dislocated worker and youth programs. So it's actually for the one-stop operator and then also those programs individually. It is not Title II and it is not Title IV. So it's Title I, the adult dislocated worker and youth program, and then the overarching who's the operator of the building that you, so the one stop where you try and have as many of those programs co-located. And so in that document is PY 21, 22, and 23, and what that funding that could, if an RFP went out in DWS was not selected would go to. And so like an example, the one-stop operator. So from those funds, a one-stop operator could get 95,000 and some change for the overall operation, which for the whole state, that's the whole state that would have to cover.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Corn?
Just as a follow-up to a technical question about the RFI, what the RFI does is justify a BEA, a bid exception request. So it's not, it's your way to be able to demonstrate to the procurement office that you did your due diligence, because what we're going to say by not doing an RFP is there's nobody else in town that can do this. Or we're going to say we are the best choice to do this. So that's what's going to get you your exception, those two elements. What an RFI does is disproves one of those. It says, we put out an RFI, nobody bid on it, therefore we are justified to do the bid exception request because nobody else can. So it's the underlying evidence that there's nobody else in town rather than saying, we know that there's nobody else in town, if that makes sense. So that's only what the RFI does. It's just a little bit more. An RFP then is you put it out. If nobody bids on it, then there's your evidence that there's no one else. So it's a quasi RFP, but it is a way to support the BEA if that's the way. And I say BEA because that's what we call it in the state procurement, the document. So just a little bit of an explanation.
No, great context. Appreciate it. Again, good stuff, right? We got to be informed. Jennifer, you want to add something?
Yes, I've received information about how North Dakota is structured, and Trevor, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It is similar to how we're structured. So the Job Service North Dakota, the state agency, has been designated by the governor for the Title I grant, grant recipient and state administrative entity, and also serves as the one-stop operator as designated by their council.
All right, thank you. All right, well, I'm going to circle back to the current motion that's on table. So the current motion, again, is to move forward with an RFI. And remind me, who was the one that put this forward? Yeah, Brenda. And then I believe it was, Tina that was seconded. So again, we're going to do a roll call. You have three options. If you are in favor of moving forward with the RFI, you will say aye. If you are opposed, you will say nay. And if you feel like you would like to abstain, you can say abstain. And then we'll see if the motion passes. So Jennifer, will you do roll call vote, please?
Governor Mark Gordon or designee?
Aye.
Senator Fred Baldwin? Representative Ryan Berger? Ron Wild?
Nay.
Tony Cross?
Aye.
Dick Smith? Chairman Eric Trowbridge?
Nay.
Larry Fodor?
Aye.
Michael Kircher?
Nay.
Bria Hammock?
Aye.
Deborah Zolnowski?
Aye.
Wendy Fiskett-John?
Aye.
Tina Conley?
Aye.
Nathan Williams? Philip Cornella?
Aye.
Brenda Morgan?
Aye.
Danny Bureau?
Aye.
Charles Wilson?
Aye.
Dan Meyer?
Aye.
Matthew Davis?
Abstain.
Director Gagan?
Nay.
Nikki Harper?
Nay.
Mayor Matt Hall? Katie Hogarty?
Aye.
Travis Lawrence?
Nay.
Ben Morgan or Ben Moritz or designee?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, this passes.
All right, so motion has passed. So we as a council have decided to move forward with an RFI. And so we'll kind of continue to keep you all in the loop on that process. But thank you also very much for all of your insight, input. Again, important decision, but I'm glad we did make a decision today on this. So we now have the next step. So all right. So just so we're looking at the agenda right now, we are currently in our break time, which is agenda item number 8. Definitely, I think everyone's ready to kind of stretch their legs a little bit. I have my gavel, so when you start hearing this, I need you all to come back to the table because right after we get back from break, we do have some guests, and I really want to respect their time. So what's going to happen is we're going to take a quick, let's see, it's 2:50. Let's do a 10. I know all of you. Oh, okay. Our guests might not be here. Unless if you're here, stand up, please. Okay. So you get 15 minutes. So 3:05, hear the gavel, sit down, and we'll continue with our MOU vote. And then we'll wait for our guests from the Business Council to join us then. All right. 15-minute break commences now. Gavel in 2 minutes. Warning. Gavel in 2 minutes. All right, council, it's 3:05. Please come back to your seats. We have one more voting item and we've got some great presentations. So come to the lights. Come to the lights. All right. Yay. Okay, good. Okay. This is kind of working. You're doing better than what you did in September. So kudos to all of you. Okay, so as you can see on our agenda, we have 3 things left. You know, we did decide to move the break up a little bit because, you know, again, thank you for your engagement and your insights on the decision around the one that we had just before break. This next decision item should be fairly quick, just because our decision to move forward with an RFI wasn't really part of the roadmap, but, you know, we definitely want to have that covered. So we're going to do that. And then we are happy to welcome some guests from the Wyoming Business Council. I believe we have you here in person, which we'll introduce you, as well as one of your colleagues has also joined us via Zoom. And it's a topic that we brought these folks here because a hot topic, not only in Wyoming, but around the nation, is childcare. So definitely we're going to have a childcare work group discussion. And then we are excited to premiere our large project, our talent transition project, and we have a teaser that you will all be seeing for the first time. And I'm excited to see it. I've heard really great things, and I have even the opportunity to watch it ahead of time. And I was like, no, I want to watch it with all of you for the first time. And then we'll just do a quick little housekeeping around what the tour is going to be later today, if you want to join us for that. And then, of course, dinner. And if you're visiting, making sure you get all checked into your hotels. We will then go into recess, and then tomorrow we shall reconvene and go back to business. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it to Jennifer to discuss agenda item number 7, which is the WIOA MOU discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. This discussion's going to be a tiny bit different. So we just talked about a bunch of the procurement process and then an MOU at the end. So I'm going to separate our 2 discussions. That discussion was an MOU regarding the one-stop operator, and that will happen whether it's DWS or anybody else. That's the end of that process. The MOU that I'm about to discuss, Nikki Harper actually started to allude to, and is a necessary item that we need to get completed, and it takes quite a bit of time. But that other MOU is part of this MOU as well. So the WIOA MOU is an MOU with the governor's office, or with the governor, with Department of Ed, with Department of Health, with Department of Family Services, and others, that talks about the entire WIOA. And it outlines the roles and responsibilities of the different organizations that administer the titles. And so it also includes the Community College Commission. Part of it is some data sharing that's in the MOU. The current MOU is attached to the agenda on onboard. So it's what we're currently working under. It technically has no expiration date, but it does have to be reviewed no less than every 3 years. And particularly for the infrastructure agreement, which is the last attachment to the document. And the infrastructure agreement really is how we figure out what programs pay for what in the one-stop area. And so I just received those final numbers. So I, over the next couple weeks, we'll start entering that information. So we have some of the numbers for the infrastructure agreement, and then discussions with all those entities I just listed out will happen because they will also have to sign the MOU. The last partner in the MOU is the council. So Chairman Trowbridge will have to sign that, which is why this MOU is brought to the council. Because Chairman Trowbridge does not want to sign a document that you have not signed off on, as well as everyone's attorneys. It feels like the AG's office, they all get to have a giant powwow in reviewing this document, and it really can take time for this. So this is the second piece. There will be an attachment with the MOU for the one-stop operator, which is why the procurement process MOU for the one-stop operator is part of this MOU, and it will start, and we already have started the bones of an updated MOU that includes all of the partners, all of the agencies, and everyone that has to be a part of that MOU. So it's going to be a long process, and you're going to see it a lot. At the January meeting, I will bring you a more updated version, specifically the attachments for the infrastructure agreement, because in the meantime, we will have conversations with the other agencies and entities that sign this agreement, so that once we have the one-stop operator MOU in place, we can add that as an attachment. So we can move forward with the bones of the MOU, but we won't be able to execute it or have the attorneys review it properly until we have the attachment for the one-stop operator, because that's a requirement to be in there as well. So it really is right now a discussion. I encourage you to read our current MOU. You learn a lot about what's going on and who are all the key players when we talk about WIOA and the different agencies, but also the data that gets shared. I will yield the rest of my time for any questions.
I also do want to call out just recently, of course, like every other company in the world, they've began to integrate generative AI into their platforms. And so onboard, if you're on onboard right now, and if you go to the agenda item number 7, there's 3 little dots right next to that document, and you can click on those 3 dots and you can use what's called their intelligent assistant. If there's like a long document, if you click on that, you have a few different options. You can also have it summarize the document, identify key risks, strategic insights, generate presentation notes, or promote discussion. So just so you know, you have some AI tools at your hand for making informed decisions and getting up to date on documents. So just to let you know, it's there. And I think that came out within the last month or 2.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is why they charge us 6% every year, is
Correct.
because they roll out those kind of updates without us asking. And so they also today launched their automated minutes. So we'll test that out and see what that looks like as well. Christy, our assistant for the council, she watched a webinar on it. So again, that just as a little antidote, that is why they build in a 6%, because they're constantly trying to innovate this platform.
Yep, and it'll be kind of cool, I'm sure, if they haven't integrated already, as we add more and more documents into onboard, that obviously all of our documents are public facing. Using that intelligent assistant, you'll actually be able to ask questions, like from meeting minutes and go, what did we discuss in September, all kinds of different things. So you can chat with it as you want versus going and finding the document and reading minutes. So The future is here, folks. All right, any council discussion? Because this is not a voting item, correct? Okay, I did not think so. Okay. Any council discussion? And of course, if you have any comments or concerns, you can definitely let me know before we sign anything on behalf of the council. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to agenda item number 9, which is our friends from the Wyoming Business Council. We have 2 folks here to join us, talk about childcare, our childcare work group. And so we have one joining us on Zoom, one here in person. I guess maybe we can just start with 2 quick introductions and then the show is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Kristen Fong here with the Wyoming Business Council. I'm joining you from Cody with a kiddo who is homesick. Shocking, right? And here we are talking about childcare. Has that happened to anybody else in the room before? I mean, I feel like I must be in good company. So let me see if I can share my screen here with the presentation. And then I have Roxanne O'Connor with us today too. I think she's there in person. Is that right?
I am, Kristen. Hi, I'm Roxanne O'Connor. I'm the Support Services Senior Administrator for Department of Family Services, but happy to be partnering with the Business Council on this really important topic.
Yes, and thank you and welcome for being here.
All right, hoping you can see that presentation. It's a picture of a kid eating all the snacks while working really hard.
Yes.
Clearly.
Thank you.
Because eating snacks constitutes working really hard when you are a 2-year-old. So as you can probably tell, I'm a working mom and also have connected with businesses around the state to learn about what are the barriers to their expansion, what are their barriers when it comes to workforce in general, and childcare is one of those things, right? If you don't have access to affordable or reliable or quality childcare, it's really, really difficult to pursue a career, much less show up for work on time. So my task today with my friend Roxanne there is to bring this topic to your attention from a business perspective, right? And that's the title of this presentation, A Business Problem with Business Solutions. But ultimately, this is a project that the Business Council has been working on with several partners, some of which are in the room with you, not just Roxanne, but I saw Shay, I think, on camera there at one point, and several, and Director Gagan, of course. And there's probably many more of you in the room that I can't see, but basically our colleagues around the state from different agencies and organizations and partners at Harvard Kennedy School's Growth Lab have analyzed and interpreted a set of data for us. And it really does illustrate that the problem in obtaining enough workforce with access to childcare is that there's just simply not enough supply of childcare. So I'm going to go to the next slide here. If I can, maybe I can't. Hang on tight, just 1 second, and I have a kiddo bugging me. Sorry, just excuse me a minute.
Kristen, do you want me to chime in for a little bit? Are you okay?
All right, there we are. There's our supply slide. I did figure it out. Technology. So, and yes, feel free to chime in whenever, Roxanne. So this feels like kind of a cluster from my perspective. Sorry in advance, everybody. Basically, we are well aware already of the problem, right? Wyoming lacks workforce. It also happens to be a childcare desert. So, our estimations with the Growth Labs data to back it up here is that about 10,000 Wyomingites might be out of the workforce due to a lack of childcare. So that's like a 28% gap. It's pretty surprising when you think about it that way. And we worked into our number there too. It's not just folks that choose to stay home with children, with one parent working and the other one staying home. The 10,000 people are actually people that would like to be working and just cannot. And childcare and access or lack of it is the main reason why they are not in the workforce. So obviously it's an issue that deserves serious attention. And a lot of the efforts that have already been done in childcare and in looking at these numbers has really been focused more so on the demand side of the problem, trying to look at different policies, or current efforts are really actually refocusing on what's preventing supply from growing. So we are taking a look at a breakdown here. If I can pull this up, of the different kind of three-pronged approaches to the problem that we're taking a look at. And we've got three different models of childcare kind of drawn out here. The first one is center-based, that in our world is something that's greater than 10 children. We have, it works really, it's got low margins. It's labor intensive. However, it has low wages, low benefits, and usually large childcare centers are operating below capacity. So if you looked at a home-based model, that would be probably up to about 10 children. It works with a relatively high profitability margin. It works in many markets in Wyoming, especially because we are a rural state. And their key issues that they're facing really are how do you start the business? How do you operate at this small scale and then expect to expand? What does that look like? So the third one is community-based, and we're not really going to get into that in a huge amount of detail today. But basically, this is like your YMCA or your rec centers that also offer a preschool or a early childhood education program. And each kind of situation is unique, and it's locally based. So I'd like to jump into each of these in a little more detail, just to kind of set up some of the information that we've been going through. And home-based in particularly, that the pros to running a home-based operation, a home-based childcare, is that there are relatively higher profitability margins, and it's definitely more viable in rural markets. Population size alone probably makes that relatively obvious. So the difficulty with a home-based childcare provider, though, is that there's information hurdles out there to start your business, and then operational challenges at a small scale. So Roxanne, if you wouldn't mind jumping into a little bit of some of these recommendations and some of the initiatives for small business support services that are already underway, because the group has been collaborating now for about a year, and we've been making some progress on some of these recommendations that were put forward already. And so there's really great progress that, Roxanne, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of that, because that's been mostly your team that's taken that initiative.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. Happy to speak to those. Backing up a little bit, when the Growth Lab came and said, we're looking at economic barriers to growth in Wyoming, lo and behold, childcare rose to the top. I said, oh yeah, we know. We've been living that for a little while. They said, how do we find out more about that? And their suggestion was to come and do research in Wyoming, right? And to actually talk to providers, Wyoming providers, about their experience, about their profitability, about their struggles with workforce, with how hard the work is, and everything in between. And they said, we really want an urban area and we want more of a rural area. And I was like, you want an urban area in Wyoming? Okay, we'll find you one of those. And so we did take a look at our childcare desert map and suggested to them that Sweetwater County was where they went. So they went to Rock Springs, which was our urban area. And we chose that for a number of reasons. One is because they do have the highest childcare desert in Wyoming, meaning that there just are not as many, there's not enough slots for children who need childcare. And it's a pretty significant gap. And then also because of the shift work that happens there, right? That is a struggle across Wyoming to try and find care for non-traditional hours. And so we wanted that lens as well. And then for their rural area, they headed over to Green River and up to Pinedale to also speak to providers there. So I think that's important because the recommendations that we're looking at are not recommendations that came necessarily from other states' research or, national research. These are recommendations that arose out of actually hearing from providers who are doing the hard work every day and doing it in Wyoming. So these are really pretty Wyoming specific recommendations that we're working on. So just as a little bit of context, in DFS, we play three major roles in early care and education or child care. And one of those roles is childcare licensing. So we have 532 licensed providers across the state. So that means that we go in and we look at those programs for health and safety requirements, right? Pretty standard, pretty basic health and safety requirements, and probably any requirements that if you're a parent, you would want to have met within those programs. There's a little bit of quality peppered into our rules to also make sure that when children are there, not only are they healthy and safe, but they're also getting, some foundational educational elements as well. And so when we had those conversations with providers and we looked at those recommendations, one of the suggestions that rose to the top was, well, if there's a program that's trying to start up and they need to come into compliance with our rules, is there funding available to do that? And right now, the answer is no, right? If you need to go and get a handrail, if you need to get egress windows or whatever it might look like, that's going to have to be something that you need to pay for in order to become licensed. Of course, that's a barrier, right? This is a business that's trying to start up. They're trying to generate a revenue and there's costs associated with that, right? And so that can certainly dissuade an individual from wanting to continue through the process. And so we're working with our partners at the Wyoming Community Foundation. Potentially, we have an application into the L. Bogan Foundation. We're working with the Department of Health, the Maternal Child Health Unit, as well as DFS is looking to invest in startup grants for programs where if they do need to come into compliance with our rules, right? And in particular, we're looking at home-based programs for this because these would be modifications to their home. And what we've seen through the research of the Growth Lab is that home-based providers, they can make a go at providing care in their homes, right? They don't have the overhead costs. They don't necessarily have the workforce costs unless they choose to have those. And they can make a living wage and more than a living wage by setting up their programs really well, being smart about their businesses. And so we're really trying to promote those home providers who are interested to be able to come into our compliance with our rules, allow us to provide them some grants to pay for that, and make sure that that's not a deterrent to becoming licensed and setting up a program. So we've identified the funding, right? And now it's a matter of figuring out the administration, but we're hoping within the next couple of months we can set this up. And then as our licensors are going out across the state, trying to license these new programs, hearing about those barriers, they have a quick way to say, here, let us help you with that from a financial standpoint to get you to the point where you need to be and get you going from a program perspective. So we're really excited about that, excited about the partnership. And I think it's something that's going to be really valuable to programs across the state. We are also doing, I mentioned licensing and our health and safety rules. We're doing an intensive rules review and looking at our rules, seeing where there might be places where things just aren't common sense, right? Things are just hard to understand. So it might not be that the rule is bad, but it's just hard and complicated, right? And saying, okay, how do we really make sure that these rules, that they make sense, that they meet us and our programs where they're at today, and that they also aren't creating a barrier to becoming licensed, right? That we're not so prescriptive in the way that we talk about things and the way that we look at things, that makes it harder for providers, right? We want our role very much to be support and assistance with health and safety always at the forefront of that, but how do we help and assist and have both health and safety and licensing exist together, right, in a way that's mutually beneficial. So those rules reviews are happening today, actually. So we're taking a deep dive into those. Let's see here. And so we are also looking at, you know, some business supports for programs, for childcare programs. One thing that has been really interesting through this research is really trying to recognize childcare programs as small businesses, right? And then how are we providing the same supports that other small businesses would have to these programs so that they can have a business case. They do know how to take advantage of tax credits. They do know how to make sure that their businesses and their operations are sustainable. So working in partnership with the Business Council and other entities to make sure that we're really enveloping the childcare community and making sure that they feel like they have those supports. And then another big initiative that we have going on at DFS is the modernization of our childcare assistance and our licensing system. Some of you may have heard me say this already, but right now, the way that a provider receives childcare assistance is through submitting a triplicate form to our offices. And that's just not the way of the world anymore, lo and behold. And so we are really looking at how do we have processes that make it hard for families to receive childcare assistance. So being able to afford childcare, and then childcare providers being able to receive that assistance payment. None of that should be hard, right? If families are eligible for childcare assistance, they should be able to apply for it. They should be able to know which providers accept it and to be able to quickly identify how to get into those programs and how to afford those programs. Providers then should be able to be paid for that quickly, right? So that they then can have a revenue source and they can sustain their business. Childcare assistance is really the one source that we have at DFS to be able to provide funding to providers, right? To help them from kind of a revenue perspective. And so we focus a lot on that. How are providers interacting with that system? How are they getting those payments? What rates do we pay, right? We look at all of that because we do see that as one way to help sustain providers from a financial standpoint, and really kind of the only way that we're able to do that. So we're modernizing our system so that, you know, we can have a bonfire at our house with the triplicate forms and make sure that everything is modernized, electronic, and really quick to help families and providers connect from a childcare programmatic and financial perspective. So Kristen, I think I hit those.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll bring the marshmallows. Sounds like a plan. You know, one thing I wanted to just elaborate on, thank you for going over all that, Roxanne, but the one thing I just wanted to mention and call out to was the quality portion of some of the resources that already exist, right? So some of the work that this group is doing is trying to understand already, you know, what resources already exist to childcare providers around the state, whether you're a center or a home-based, right? And that the peer-to-peer support and the work that Nikki Baldwin is doing at the University of Wyoming has been really important in this area. And all of the training, you know, that people like Denise Steele has been working on and getting her training set up for early child care providers. That's all really important and really already done well. So where are the gaps is kind of what we've been trying to identify, is where are there providers that are struggling to make ends meet, or not understanding maybe the barriers to entering this business. And so that's where the startup grants can come into play, and as well some other services that we'll get into later as well. Just making sure that the right resources are matched to the individuals and the businesses that need them. And it is really intriguing that so many home-based childcare providers do not even consider themselves businesses in many ways, because they are so good at what they do. They're forging friendships with the parents and with the children, and it becomes almost like a community service instead of operating as a business itself. So that's an important thing to kind of understand, is that as we go through this work, quality it's almost like this, it's a given, right? It's hugely important. And it's not going to be a sustainable business if you don't offer quality childcare. It's all gonna, the educational component and the safety and the health of it is, super important. So, but also if that doesn't exist, it's not going to be a viable business. So, let me jump to the next slide. So we can talk a little bit about what resources already exist for center-based providers and why that is a focus of this group. So centers are providing a higher number of slots per facility. And they do represent about 85% of the slots that are currently available or licensed in Wyoming. And available versus licensed is kind of a complex comparison there, because you might be licensed to have many, many more than you actually have enrolled. But due to industry workforce or, available space and ratios and numbers like that, you might not actually be operating at capacity. So that's interesting. And that does then factor into some of the negative or the harder challenges around being a center-based provider. You've got lower margins because it is more labor intensive. You can offer, lower wages than is likely median for your area. And then you're likely operating below capacity because you can't hire and keep and retain staff in all cases. So, and then Roxanne, I'm going to let you jump in again about some of the initiatives that have already been taking place here, specifically around the childcare subsidy availability, and specifically also the transferable background checks. I think has been really cool to see progress go in and forward in that.
Yeah, so I'm looking at childcare assistance for childcare workers. This was another recommendation that came from the Growth Lab, and it was really kind of the realization that many of the childcare staff are working parents, most likely working moms, right? And so they also need childcare in order to then provide childcare for the greater good, right? For the greater community. And then also what we know about childcare staff in general is that they don't make a good wage at all, right? I mean, we're talking $12 an hour. So really looking at ways that we can help support staff, childcare staff, right? The workforce issue that Kristen mentioned is really kind of an interesting dichotomy. If we don't have childcare workforce and we don't have them supported, we don't have a greater workforce, right? And so really focusing on how do we support the childcare workforce to then be able to, like I said, serve more families within communities and help communities grow. And so what we kind of have looked at is childcare staff likely qualify for childcare assistance, right? And there's going to be outliers, right? But if you look at just kind of a back of the napkin calculation, childcare staff are likely going to qualify for childcare assistance. And so making sure that we're making those connections with childcare staff to know that this is a benefit that if they apply for, and also if we make it easier for them to apply for, they're probably more willing to do that, that they can then benefit from. And then the programs that they work for are going to receive that income as well, right? That revenue as well. Oftentimes what we hear is that programs will provide free child support for their staff. Or not child support, child care for their staff. And so what that does then means that child care provider is either having a tax write-off or they're losing the funding for that slot. And then their business isn't sustainable, right? And so again, looking at ways that with the money that we have from just a child care assistance perspective, how are we helping programs invest in themselves and invest in their workers to help make it a little bit more viable for their business and then for their staff to be able to come to work and afford, all of the other expenses that they have aside from childcare. So we're doing a pretty significant marketing campaign just from an awareness standpoint so that programs know that this is something that can exist and that they can benefit from. Transferable background checks. I need to explain this a little bit, and it's a little complicated. So there's a number of background checks that are done on childcare staff. That is a child care development block grant, our funding. That's a federal requirement, and also one that's necessary for safety as well. But those background checks, they are a lengthy process, right? And so what we are doing with our modernization of our system is that we are essentially credentialing a child care staff person as a certified child care provider, right? Each staff person is. And so they're not tied to one program. They're not tied to ABC 1, 2, 3, and they're certified to work there. They're certified to work in child care in general, right? And so if there's a place where we saw this a lot in COVID, right? There was a place where there just wasn't staff because people were quarantined and so they couldn't provide care for children. Well, if there was portability with background checks and with the rest of their credentialing, we can have staff moving across programs where the need is, right? To be able to help backfill, to have kind of a layer of support for programs so that they can continue to operate, families can continue to be served. And so we're really looking at how are we making sure that we're credentialing at the individual level so that services can be provided not at individual programs, but more across communities. And I think I got the other ones, Kristen.
Yeah, thank you. I think it helps to just have an understanding for everybody there that how much DFS is already doing and making strides on in order to, remedy the situation. There's so many avenues that we can look at and explore. And the fact that we're already making progress on so many, I think is really cool. So thank you for your team and all you're doing. So the two avenues we talked about today, the home-based care and also the center-based care. It's really great, I think. Hold on just one second here. I have a quiet house for most of the morning with a child napping, and then all of a sudden I don't. I apologize. Right when I need it to be a little more quiet. Isn't that just how it goes? But what I wanted to talk about more so was the process of how we got to where we are now and the just kind of like celebrating also the partnerships that we forged through this process. Our group has grown over the last year to incorporate, several other additional partners from, UW and, Workforce Services all the way to the Wyoming Women's Foundation and the Wyoming After School Alliance. And so kind of recognizing the collaboration that has taken place through this process and knowing also how large the group has become, we decided as a group that we would kind of drill down deeper on specific topic areas. So basically the things after the last two slides that we just showed you, the things that need more work, right? Things that are not already being tackled by Department of Family Services or Workforce Services, right? Things that still kind of remain to be discovered, right? What are the barriers that are there? For example, when you are thinking about opening up your own childcare home, what are the barriers that exist there? Or when you are operating a childcare center, how can we do so more efficiently? And so you can pay your staff maybe a higher wage or maybe offer benefits or somehow look at other ways to be a sustainable business model. And maybe that is through one of these three things here. So the next steps are that our group has grown and we've drilled down into these, what we're calling strike teams. It sounds, like a big deal, but it really, it's just a way for us to kind of refocus our efforts. And, to use some business buzz terms, we're sprinting towards some of these goals. So the first strike team is really going to focus down on startup grant funding, as Roxanne was sharing with you earlier. There's commitments for investment from several partners already, and we're continuing to kind of grow a pool of funds that will allow us to assist home-based providers to get past that initial hurdle. And so we've got a survey out right now, actually, through the Department of Family Services licensors and through a couple other channels as well, to better identify, what would be some small business support services that you need. Why is it that maybe are you not aware or are you not accessing resources that exist, like the Small Business Development Center resources or the Wyoming Women's Business Center resources, et cetera. So there are places to go when you've got questions about how to do your financial planning and forecasting as a business, or there are, one-on-one coaching is available through the Small Business Development Center. Why is it that about 15% currently of childcare providers that are licensed in the state have accessed or currently accessing SBDC services? So we're, working together to kind of better understand why that is, 15%. That's kind of, maybe it's illustrative of what the business model itself is, and that you care for the children and you care for the families. And so you don't consider yourself a traditional business. But yet these resources are out there, and there's a couple of SBDC staff people already that's actually one of their areas of expertise. So how can we better match the resources to the folks that need it most? And then Roxanne gave a little bit of an overview about the third strike team that's focusing on subsidies for childcare workers themselves. And that's another interesting aspect. I think we have a lot of work to do in understanding how that could be a solution. And I think we're getting close to kind of piloting some of these and seeing what impact we have to see if they're sustainable going forward. Did you have anything you wanted to add on any of those, Roxanne?
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. Just a couple of other things I wanted to add. We come to these conversations, especially with businesses, and it's kind of like, okay, well, here's what we're doing, right? And we're working really hard to move the needle. But I think that there's only so much that individually we can do. And that's why I think the collaboration that we have right now with so many entities is so incredibly powerful and, quite frankly, just really cool. But I always, in these conversations, I want to make sure that we leave some pretty tangible things of, okay, this is what DFS is working on. This is what the Business Council and the collaborative was working on. What can we do, right? And so, like I mentioned, we have investment pools really from a family assistance standpoint, right? And so when there are childcare programs that aren't making a go of it, right, from a profitability standpoint, and they come to us, there's just not a whole lot of funding. There's not funding available to be able to support from a business perspective. And so I think, understanding and knowing that there are things that we can do within communities to help support providers is an important takeaway. And so some things that we have seen work in communities is really partnerships with Chamber of Commerce, with individual private entities who say, we know we need childcare in our communities. Let's go fundraise, right? Let's go in and provide some community support. And Saratoga, actually, I don't know if anybody's from Saratoga, but they've done an incredible job of really bringing the community together and saying, this is important. We came in from a licensing perspective and said, you're right. We're right here alongside you to make sure that this can work, right? And they found a place. They had fundraising to be able to hire workers, but it was really that community effort that helped make a go at that. In Saratoga, Du Bois is another example of where we've seen that. So just knowing that things can happen locally if there's interest, and we've seen that, and also know that we're happy to share kind of some of those best practices that we've seen across the state if there's interest in a community. We've seen things like businesses partnering with the childcare programs to say, hey, we have space. If you're interested in the program, right? If you like kids, then we have the space for you, right? And so really seeing, because what we see is programs have a hard time finding infrastructure and businesses have infrastructure at times, right? And so making those connections and those partnerships we've seen work in communities. Also looking at kind of tri-share models from an employer perspective to say, hey, if the families pay a certain amount for childcare, we'll provide a certain amount for childcare assistance, you know, and then helping families be able to afford that, and then really kind of help paying for access from a provider perspective as well. So those are just a couple of examples that we've seen across communities to where, you know, we've gotten really pretty creative and innovative to help support, you know, not only families, not only workforce, but the programs and providers as well, so that, you know, the community as a whole can benefit. And always happy to talk more about that as well.
Great. Well, awesome. Thank you, Kristen, and all the great stuff. You know, as we mentioned, you know, the healthcare thing comes up quite often in all of our workforce conversations. And really the purpose for you as a council is continue to build better interstate relationships, right? Making sure that we're not doubling up on efforts. You know, maybe we get creative and think about, oh, we could help in this way. We can't do this. You can do that. I can do that. That's where really the true power of like transformative change is when, you know, business council and DFS come together, or the workforce council come together in ways that we can to create a much more robust and complex program. So, and I do know also, well, I don't have specifics. I remember North Dakota passed some pretty progressive legislation a couple of years ago around healthcare. And when we were there with the NDA last year, they were just talking about how amazing it was to get that. So I hope Wyoming also might be looking in that direction. North Dakota is a good friend of ours.
Well, hey, thank you so much for having us, and thank you for bringing that to this group's attention too. That's something that this group obviously is really interested in learning more about, and so please do reach out to either one of us. We meet at least once a week, I would say at this point, either in small groups or in our larger group. And we continue this conversation and try to learn about, you know, what are other states doing that is successful or creating an impact. We can learn from that too and apply it, you know, certain aspects of it maybe that would fit to Wyoming. And so I think there's always opportunities to learn more and to collaborate. And so I would, you know, welcome any of you, if you have thoughts or if you have awareness of a business that's doing really interesting things in the childcare space to support their workers, that could be an interesting conversation as well. So please stay in touch with us both.
Yeah, we totally will. You know, that's the kind of the cross benefits, right? You can learn about what we're doing, kind of our priorities and vice versa. And then you see they have their contact information here on the slide. So I know we don't have time for questions, but if you do, you can reach out to them directly. Or if you don't have that, just reach out to Jennifer. All of you have Jennifer's email or on onboard. Feel free to send any and all questions, comments, inputs, and we'll make sure that gets forwarded out. So, well, thank you so much for joining
Mr.
us.
Chairman,
Yes.
before we let them go, would it be possible for you to send me an article that I can put into the newsletter for the Southwest Wyoming Manufacturing Partnership? And no, Larry, you don't get to throw things at me.
He gave it all out in September, I think.
As a matter of fact, if you'll send us or send the newsletter an article, we'll put it in there and we'll help spread the message for you in Southwest Wyoming.
Thank you for that. That would be great. Yes.
Let's Philip, real quick.
Yeah, I just had a quick kind of tailing off of what you said about North Dakota. They actually have requirements. Some states are starting to come up with requirements for businesses to be able to come in and work in our state. They would commit to childcare. Is that something that we've even tried? Because other states are already doing it.
Yeah, I do believe part of the North Dakota legislation was that to like, if you're going to come in and you're going to create these jobs, you also have to help support the people that you're going to hire. And that part of that support is healthcare, childcare.
Yeah, I believe I believe New Mexico is doing something similar. Washington State.
Yeah, and they also looped in a lot of the grant programs that you're looking at, you know, for like home base, center base. They've kind of made that at a state level, you know, really. So it's a lot of work getting your legislature to approve that, you know, but that's what it takes multiple groups to get that done. That's what North Dakota did.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
so grateful for the opportunity to dive into that more. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Yes. Have a great day. And All right, moving on to our next agenda item, which is going to be item number 10. As you all know, we have been working incredibly hard on the talent transition. It's been going back and forth. It's been in many different phases. But as of recent reports, the project is moving forward. It sounds like very well. And Jennifer is going to be giving us a quick little background as well as showing us a trailer of what you can expect to see coming up in 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm working on getting back to that slide and remembering to push share sound this time before I share that slide. I did. You couldn't see it though. Is a secret. So we've been talking about talent transition for many years. We have been funded for just over a year, right? Yeah. We had a contract and it didn't work. And then we found a different contractor and that one has worked. And their timeline is amazing. So to bring you back for those who haven't been on this journey with us about talent transition, this is an ARPA funded program to target unemployed and underemployed individuals, but we're trying to keep it broad so that we can use it for years to come, that it's not just for this program as well, but it is focused on unemployed and underemployed individuals. What we're creating is a video library of career exploration videos. And our marketing firm is traveling the state. We first targeted next gen sector partnerships. They'll be going to Rock Springs soon. They're coming back here and visiting with some of our partnerships, but our marketing firm also has partnerships throughout the state. We took a page out of Governor Gordon's designee Lauren's playbook, and we hired her firm, and they're amazing. And they've got some contacts, so we can have a really robust library of these career exploration videos. They're also going to go to Brenda Morgan's outfit, and it's not just about career exploration, it's telling a story. So a lot of the individuals that are being interviewed and will be part of this video library tell a story of transitioning from one industry to an occupation that we're targeting. And in the Senate note, the 4 industries that we're targeting are advanced manufacturing, healthcare, construction and trades, and hospitality and tourism. So those are the 4 that we must focus on. And what I am happy to present today is a video that they've created for you to let you know what we're working on.
Cool. And then can we get
It's
some
just
lights?
a teaser. It's just, well, they called it wasn't even a teaser. What was it called? A sprinkle. Yeah. It's just to show you that we've made great progress in the last 4 months. Maybe. Yeah. And the campaign's tagline is Forge Your Future. So I'm going to stop calling it talent transition very soon and call it Forge Your Future.
Until this thing is over.
Okay. I just wanted to come and check.
Okay, I'm gonna put my computer really close.
Wide open spaces. It's a place of opportunity. Their dreams and thrive in their communities.
Nope.
Campaign showcases the opportunities available.
Let me try one more thing. Go back. Trevor, push that button. It's your mic. No, it's Zoom.
Final attempt. Otherwise, we may do a reattempt in the morning, or we'll just send you the link. You can watch it on your own. Anyway, we need a popcorn machine. So I'll be presenting that to the council. We'll get it nice and branded and be good. All right, I'm going to make the executive decision. We're going to move because we do have, obviously, a site tour. For those of you who are here in Cheyenne, you need to get checked into hotels. And of course, we have dinner tonight. So all three really great things. So let me just give you, again, everyone in this room is happy to join us for our site tour if you want. So as you know, outside of being the chair of the Wyoming Workforce Development Council, I am the Director of Development and Enterprise Applications for Blue Federal Credit Union. So essentially, I am your king nerd there. I oversee a lot of our computer scientists, our coders, designers, working on all of our mobile applications, Android, iOS, online banking. We just relaunched a new one, which has been really interesting challenges, but we're building up our team and getting better. But where we're going to meet is when you go. So for those of you here in China, so the address is there available to you on onboard. If for those of you who've been here before, it's the big blue building right at the big roundabout at Converse and Pershing. So we have a retail space. So we're going to start the site tour because my team, we've got about 400 employees at this time. They're not all at that building, but they're still working. It's going to be 4:30, and so I don't want to do the world headquarters tour there while they're working. So one of the reasons I'm bringing the council to Blue is we have a nonprofit called the Blue Foundation. And the Blue Foundation, we just took on a new project called Boost by Blue, and we hired an executive director. Her name is Laura Fowler. Fortunately, she won't be able to join us. They're having their board meeting down at the Blue Arena in the Loveland area right now. But what we do is we bring together all nonprofits and families in need, people in need. It's just like, I need help. Maybe I need money for childcare, or I need food. Is there a food pantry, or I'm trying to find a job? And as we've been building out, and you'll learn more about the Booth Center at Blue, I was talking to Laura and I was like, oh my gosh, like, why are you not working with the Department of Workforce Services and the Workforce Council? So kind of as a side mission that I'll have for each of you as you learn about what Boost by Blue does. We just opened that center about a month ago, and we are planning on expanding to like 4 or 5 other locations towards the end of the year, and also introducing community support services. So just kind of brainstorm. There might be someone in your network too. We're really just trying to make it a one-stop shop in a way, we have one stops, right? But this truly is one stop from everything. You don't have housing, you don't have food, you don't know anything. Like, we're trying to get and then we are working with quite a bit of families right now. And then so after we give a little presentation at the Blue World headquarters, you'll go see their new facility. So this is where we have an area for children to come in. If the family has kids, we'll kind of look at that. And then we're going to go back to World headquarters. And that's when I will let you in via into the employee space. Just because we are a financial institution, please don't touch anything. Don't look at anything. And it is small, and just again, be respectful, because there may still be some teams that are still working. Like our call center is open until 6. So I probably won't take you through that spot, because we are actively calling and talking to our members and helping them with all of their money and all that good stuff. But I will try my best to explain the center as we go through. And then when I get there, I'll kind of just give you a little bit of background on Blue, which, if you don't know, like, Blue is Wyoming's largest credit union. We're about a $3 billion financial institution. So we have about 150,000 members. There's about 40,000 people that sign into our online banking systems a day or within a week. So we're constantly, we're moving people. And when we have your money, and things go down, it's pretty important. So we are a 24/7, 365 shop at Blue, and we've got 28 physical locations. We're building 2 new ones here in Cheyenne. We're announcing those next year, which is exciting. And then we're also continuing to expand into Colorado. So we just actually went through a merger. So we did acquire a smaller credit union in the Pueblo, Southern Colorado area called Aventa Credit Union. And we spent the last year integrating all of their 100 employees into our culture, into our team. And then we had to move $350 million perfectly, every penny counted for, with NCUA watching us for 6 months as we moved everything over to become one credit union. So so that's Blue, and we are anticipated to grow double in size in the next 3 to 4 years. So that means more mergers are coming, and we're picking up little credit unions around Wyoming and Colorado all the time now. So I'm excited to welcome you to Blue and to kind of give you a quick little behind the scenes thing. And I think one thing that, if you're walking around, the thing, I've worked at Blue now for about 3 years, come December, is never thought of myself ever working at a credit union or financial institution. The culture at Blue is absolutely amazing. From the CEO to the executives to, you'll see just how much focus we put into our employees and making sure that they're happy to work there. We have meditation rooms, we have gyms, we do all kinds I think we have like 68 different benefits that Blue offers its employees. Our jobs don't stay open very long, because people know, and when you get into Blue, like, we do take really good care of you. And we are pioneering quite a few interesting financial tools that you'll be hearing about also next year. And I'm working on those, but I can't say much about that yet. So excited to introduce you to our very new Boost by Blue. And if you haven't been to Blue, here's Blue. So when you get to the big business, go to the big building. It's big looking fancy building. Don't go to the small one. That's actually our branch. Unless you need to make some money transactions or something. Sure. If you remember, go in there if you need to. But when you get inside, there are 3 entrances to Blue World headquarters. The 2 entrances that you're going to enter in on are either the west or the east side. So basically just park. The only entrance you don't want to go into, because it's the employee entrance, is on the south side. So if you get to a door that has a key card and a creepy looking hallway and you're trying to open it and it's not working, you're at the 3rd door that I told you not to go to. So walk around and either go on either side. there, what you'll find is you'll find a reception area. And for how many of you have been to Blue World headquarters before in our community space? Yep. It's the big room with all the tables and all that stuff. So you can ask the receptionist where it's literally, you'll just turn the corner, but take a look around. I think it's a really cool modern place. If you haven't been to Blue World headquarters before, we'll convene there. We'll get a presentation from the Booth Center. And then we'll go take a look at their facility, and then we'll do a tour of Blue. And then off you go check into your hotel rooms and eat. And then obviously converse and have a lot of great ideas. So enjoy your time. So I'm going to go ahead and officially call us to recess. I will see you all tomorrow, but I don't see you tonight, or the tour, 8:30. The gavel will commence at 8:30. Gavel at 8:30.